it ran 944 at 143 miles an hour with a 135 60-foot time. 0 to 60 as data acquisition, so I have data logs on this. 0 to 60 is 1.98 seconds. It's like twice as quick as a Bugatti Veyron, for instance.
Right.
And pulls about 1.68 G out of the hole.
So
it's a real monster, and it's done naturally aspirated and in a street legal trim. Like on a 5 hot lap event, this car was a street legal car, was quicker than every quick NA Foxbody or any Mustang period in the US.
howdy folks, I'm in the prairies of Western Canada, Calgary, Alberta to be specific, and we're on our way to see a good friend of mine, Mathew Puzey, who is the owner of Tecmotion. This is the gentleman that tuned my 92 Coupe for me. He's one of these old school tuners that can still hang and bang and handle these old OBD1 Ford computers. He is an absolute genius when it comes to this stuff. And like I say, one of a dying breed as well. Now, he's got all kinds of fun stuff to check out in his shop. He's got a 90 Coupe, street legal, naturally aspirated, that runs sub 10-second quarter miles. It's one of the quickest coupes ever to be ran in North America. All kinds of other fun stuff. So anyway, stay tuned. We're gonna jump out here. I'll introduce you to Mathew. We'll do a little shop tour. Okay, folks, let's do it. There he is.
Hey, Gary.
Thanks for having me in, buddy. Yeah, you too. Good to see you. Okay, little shop tour, I figured, hey?
Yeah, right.
Check the cars out, and
It's Foxbody heaven here, I guess.
and a busy shop at that.
Yeah, lots of stuff going on. I'm sorry about the mess. I mean, we're in the middle of a couple of different projects, and I got them at various stages. I got parts everywhere and cars on jacks and whatnot. So
I think that's a good thing. Justifies that a guy's busy, right?
yeah, for sure.
Well, what do you think? Should we start with the belle of the ball, or do we work up to it?
No, why don't we start with this car? This car here is affectionately known as the Tecmotion Coupe. That's my display sign for shows. Often we'll show it with a video loop with the car in action, because
Right.
I think to understand this car, you've got to really see it in action.
Because when did this car come into its full effect? Like when it's been in existence for quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the car since 2000, maybe. It's a 1990.
Right.
And I bought the car specifically to race.
Right.
Had a 97 Cobra that I'd bought new. And, we had a little fun with that car, but it was pretty clear that there were no parts.
Yeah.
And there weren't ever going to be a lot of parts for the car. And, I mean, it was my drive around car too. So
Right.
In those days, it seemed like if you really wanted to go racing with Mustangs, you start with a Foxbody.
Yeah.
And so I spent quite a bit of time, even in those days. And remember, like, this car would only have been 10 years old when I bought it.
Right.
Even in those days, finding a nice one was a challenge.
Yeah.
These cars, got chopped up almost right away. And I went and looked at this car a couple times. The first time or two I looked at it, we didn't even start the car. I mean, I spent time underneath the car looking at the torque boxes and
The bones.
underneath. And the car is a really, really clean coupe. And
Yeah.
it's a coupe, which is, the stiffest, lightest Fox body. So
Well, and I guess we should let folks know that this car albeit the nasty monster that it is. Like, you used to drive it to work, did you not?
Yeah, for sure. I in another life, I had like a downtown Calgary job, the kind of downtown Calgary job where I have my own parking spot, and
Right.
I would take this car down there, especially on Fridays or something, just for
Yeah.
laughs because I enjoyed driving it. Solid roller and 3.5-inch exhaust and all this stuff, and
Setting alarms off.
I set all the alarms off on all these guys' Mercedes and stuff in the parking lot,
Right.
in the parkade. Yeah, it was. I don't know. It really stuck out as a different kind of a car amongst the executives, I guess.
Sure.
Maybe I should give you a little rundown for your viewers who are not familiar
Sure.
with the car as to what it really is. So if you take a kind of an overview look at it, it looks like it could be a know-nothing car. And we always thought by keeping it sort of under the radar, we would get a psychological advantage in the shootout races that we did. But the truth is, when you have a fast car in shootouts, everybody knows, and it doesn't matter what it looks like, they see you coming. So we never, I think there's only one event I was ever at where we, fooled guys
Right.
with a psychological advantage. But it looks like it could be a 1250 car.
Right.
And it sounds that way too. It's a fully muffled, street legal type car. It even could give the appearance of a 14-second car with an aftermarket hood and no exhaust.
Right.
But it ran 944 at 143 miles an hour with a 135/60 foot time. 0 to 60, it has data acquisition, so I have data logs on this. 0 to 60 is 1.98 seconds. It's like twice as quick as a Bugatti Veyron, for instance.
Right.
And pulls about 1.68 G out of the hole.
Oh.
So it's a real monster, and it's done naturally aspirated and in a street legal trim, and it was built for events here in Western Canada, especially around Alberta, streetcar shootout events where you had to have a registered and insured car that was street legal. In some cases, you had to make a prover cruise or some other qualification like that to demonstrate that it was really a streetable car.
Right.
And then you had to make it was shootout. So it's heads up start, run what you brung. And, our objective always was to bring a howitzer to a knife fight. Maybe I'll open the hood and you can get a little bit of a look underneath here. This car runs, well, it would really be capable of about 10,000 RPM, but we set the car up to run about 9,000 RPM. And the idea there was you run parts that are capable of 10,000 RPM, and then you hold it back, and instead of, having to change out all the guts of your engine every, 5 or 10 passes, you can change it out every 350 passes or something like that.
Right.
So, and because it's it is a street legal car, the idea was to be able to run a full season of shootout racing with the car without having to get into it at all, other than you got to do a valve train setup in the words of Jim from Bennett Racing, every time you go to the track, you want to stay on top. That's what he said. Well, anyway, that's about right. Like 8 passes or something like that. And I use a on the head spring pressure checker to make sure that the springs aren't going away, and then set your lash.
Well, I'm being solid lifter too, right?
Yeah, it's we never the car's very well disclosed. If you go on my website, there's a shop cars page and all the parts list is on there. My engineer didn't like this. He thought we're going to tell people how it's done and they're going to compete with us and beat us. But I said, don't worry. I mean, there's more than just a parts list when it comes to putting something together like this.
Yeah.
And we did very well racing it. I won like 15 shootouts or shootout series with the car. The cam is something that we never talked about. But to give you some idea, it's like an 810 lift at the valve.
Wow. So fully custom intake.
Yes. So we designed and built that intake. We think that this is probably the baddest intake ever put on a small Ford. We talked to guys who were supposed to be the intake hotshots, but frankly, I think we felt that our own team here knew more about intakes than anybody else. So the way this works is you can think of it as an individual trumpet style intake, but it's enclosed in a 1,000 cubic inch air box. It has provision for a pair of 105 millimeter throttles, which were the biggest throttles available at the time. Now, finally, there are some bigger throttles.
So that would have been this.
That's what that door is for another throttle. And I have the throttle and stuff, but the thing is, based on our testing, we felt like we were going to get 10 or 15 horsepower out of that. And there's a complicated linkage situation that's required for it. I mean, we had it all designed. I even have the filter place marked on the inner fender here. If you look there,
it was coming.
Yeah, but it seemed like there was always another thing that was more important. So the secondary throttle never got done. The way the system is controlled is it's fuel injected, use a map sensor control, but because of the big air box, there's one vacuum feed off of there, and you get a nice stable signal for your engine management system, where if you run an actual stack intake, you end up taking a composite feed off the individual stacks, and it's pulsy, and you get a noisy, crappy feed that's hard to get a tune-up on. But this car, starts after one or two cranks and idles at 950 or 1,000 RPM, and just like it was a production car.
Unreal. So I'm sure folks are going to have some questions about this belt-driven distributor that you're running.
Yeah, sure. It's an extremely unusual and custom setup on a Ford. You're more likely to see this kind of pro stock front mount type distributor on a Chevy or Dodge, and the reason for that is when you have a car that's got the distributor at the back, if you try to put a big cap on it, it interferes with the firewall. And so this setup is more common on those cars, but it was done on this car to create room for this manifold. And otherwise the distributor interferes with the manifold, and you end up with a situation like you do with, say, like a Super Victor, which we ran at one point on the car, where the runner lengths vary, right? So the center runners are about the length that we wanted, but the front and back runners are way too long, and you end up with a compromise on that kind of manifold, where this has the same runner length for all 8 runners. So it's tuned for a specific RPM application, and it really excels. I think compared to the Super Victor at 8,600 RPM, we gained 70 or 75 wheel horsepower.
Wow.
So, and it was better. Like, the car comes out about 6,200, and it never pulls down as a slipper clutch in at a McLeod soft lock. So it drives into the RPM band. throughout the entire operating range on the strip, it was better than the Super Victor. And then at the top, it was way, way better because the Super Victor does run out of breath. I know Edelbrock say, oh, good for, well, they say 8,500 or 9,000, but they run out of breath. And like, that's a good combo for cars that are 7,000 RPM cars.
Right.
Really a good combo, but it's less of a good combo for cars that are 9,000 RPM cars.
Getting into street bike RPM range.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
the cylinder heads are Edelbrock 7721s. So I don't know, when I got these heads, I bet there weren't half a dozen sets of heads like this in this country.
okay.
In fact, there might have been 0 other sets of heads like this in the country. They have total engine airflows, 395 port job. So they flowed 396 CFM intake and 310 exhaust. And to put that in perspective, a typical set of good ported inline small block or Windsor style Ford heads will flow like 295 intake. So these flow better on exhaust than on intake. And that's, I mean, if you guys know anything about Ford cylinder heads, this is one of the weak points of the Ford setup, the Windsor setup, is the exhaust flow is poor. That's why you run split pattern cams, where you bias the exhaust cam with more duration and more lift, in order to try and compensate for the poorer flow on the exhaust side. So, so the exhaust flow is better than the intake flow on a typical real nice set of ported Ford heads. Okay. Aftermarket heads. Yeah. They're pretty incredible heads. There are some heads that flow more today, but I've looked at some that they flow more intake, but they flow less exhaust. And I can't see how that is a good combination, because you'll end up with a cam that is so biased towards exhaust that the car's hard to run, I think. So, and then what's the cubic inch of the motor? It's 399. Okay. 0.6. Right. The genesis of this motor, I mean, everybody thinks I put cubic dollars in it, and let's get real, this kind of project costs money. But we're on a budget like everybody else. And what happened was NMRA in Hot Street changed the rules. They used to require 400-inch maximum, right? And then they allowed you to go to 430-inch maximum. And so instantly, all the parts that were there for 400-inch maximum were obsoleted. And so I got the guts of this motor that were destined for an NMRA 400-inch motor, and we put it in here. And then we, like I said, we detuned it a little bit. So instead of having to rebuild the motor anywhere from 1 to 5 or 10 passes, the idea is it needs a refresh like at 350 passes. Wow. That kind of thing. So, and now another impressive little thing that I know about this car is this transmission. Right? Well, and I guess we should make note of saying, like full weight car, power windows, power locks. Yeah, it heater controls. It weighs 3160. So that's very close to the production weight of a Fox Coupe. And let's be real. I mean, I did my best to lighten the car, and it has some parts that are for lightning, and it has, there's no back seat and stuff like that, but it is a full interior car. Yeah. And I'm going to draw your attention to the fact that it's a 10-point cage, but I've got stuff like the map light and visors, right? You can't believe how hard it is to put this kind of stuff back in a car with a 10-point headliner. Right. All that stuff's in there, the dome light, and all that stuff works. And all the panels are in there. And the crash beams are in the doors. I know lots of guys like, oh, this car is really light, but if you swing the door, go ahead, give it a swing. Oh yeah, that's the full deal, right? And that's power windows and locks. So unreal. It's every time we took weight out of it, we ended up putting it back in safety or strength. Right. Like as an example, it has a McLeod 8660 bell housing. It's a clutch car. It has an 8660 bell housing, which that bell housing alone weighs, I think, 42 pounds. Right. Right. So that's a big weight uptick. And the Lenco I mean, it's the nuclear option. That's how they used to advertise it. And it's very strong, and it has the advantage of you can pedal it, you can downshift it, you can drive it on the street. It's an ST1200, and the ST is for street.
Right.
I mean, there's guys, I think they typically suggest that you don't drive more than about 5,000 miles a year with it on the street, but it's meant to be driven on the street. And to be honest, I think the car's better mannered on the street with the Lenko than it was with the TKO 600. But the Lenko's really heavy.
Okay.
And it's lossier than a traditional H pattern type transmission.
Okay. Maybe I'll get a view of it from the other side and get you to tell the story on this thing, because this well, you're one of the only fellas that you're aware of that's kind of ran down this road too, right?
Yeah, there aren't very many guys put a Lenko in a Foxbody, and in fact, you feel like this is a well understood like bell housing combination and whatnot. These cars were raced all over, but they custom make the input shaft for you, and the input shaft isn't retained with a bearing retainer like on a T5 or a TKO.
Okay.
It floats, and so it has to have a specific clearance to the back of the crank. And anyway, it took three goes at it to get the right input shaft in the car. I think the first time they must have been thinking like top loader style,
right?
That kind of bell housing, and they built it too short, I guess. And then the next one, for whatever reason, they built with a 4-cylinder style pilot shaft.
Oh,
so that was no good. Finally, I got that done, and there was a point where I guess I was the worldwide expert on putting a Lenko in a Foxbody, and so if they got inquiries from guys, they gave them my number. I had a few guys call up here. I'm not sure how many of them actually, tried to do it. I think we spent a winter doing the transmission. It was something like 1,000 hours, and it's not a removable tunnel or anything. So like this car is a street car, so it's and you got all the console and all of this stuff all put back in. So
sure,
it's kind of a big deal to get it to work. If you're not familiar with the transmission, think of a power glide. So a power glide has two speeds, underdrive and direct, and it's a planetary arrangement, right?
Yeah.
So this is a stack of 2-speed cases like that, 3 cases. Each one of these silver levers controls one of the cases. So you start the transmission out in underdrive, and the underdrive ratio of each of the cases, you multiply those together to get your first gear ratio.
Okay.
This is a 302 first gear ratio, right? Then 488 final drive.
Okay.
So you launch the car with a clutch. It doesn't use a torque converter. It uses a clutch. And I use a McLeod soft lock, which is a single disc slipper style clutch. So that clutch is designed that when you hit it, it slips a little bit and then tightens up. And that allows you to manage your launch hit based on the available traction.
Okay.
And so once you get it launched with the clutch, like you would any clutch car, you just keep your right foot down and start jerking levers. So if you go like that, that puts that case in direct.
Okay.
By the time you've jerked them all, you're in direct drive. There's no overdrive, and then you're across the stripe, and then you start bringing the car down.
Right.
And this little black lever, in the position it's in now is neutral. In the forward position there is reverse, and in the rearward position is forward.
Okay.
So that's your forward and reverse setting.
Wow. Unbelievable.
If you run like a Liberty equalizer, those kind of transmissions require a rebuild like every pass. Like the NHRA Pro Stock on Liberty equalizer, and they're light and they're gated and all this, but you'll never see pedaling in pro stock because
Right.
if they have to lift or they have to pedal, then it comes out of gear.
Right.
So where this can be pedaled and it stays in gear,
Okay.
right? And I mean, some of these events in Alberta run at airports, and lots of these track conditions are sub-ideal. And so you're going to be in an event where the money's on the line and the car's starting to get away from you, and if you can pedal it, you're going to try and get control of it. And if you can't, you're going to go, yeah, I'm pretty sure I could drive through this.
Right.
And 99% of the time you put it in the wall.
Yeah, you're in the weeds. Yeah.
So, I mean, I've won races where I had to pedal the car and got a hold of it and got back on it, and away you go. Well, you can do that with the Lenco, but you can't with stuff like the equalizer.
Okay.
You do pay a weight and parasitic loss price for it, though. Sure.
So, and then high level on the electronics of the car.
Yeah. All right. So it runs engine management. It uses the Racetech SDS system. So that used to be quite a popular system. It's used primarily today in like kit airplanes. So I think there's a lot of guys who don't understand SDS because it works a little differently than some of these laptop managed table-based systems. It's a vector type system, but honest to God, I think you have more fuel points with SDS than almost any other system even today. So
Okay.
it's, especially for a race car, it was a really good system. And that system's made here in Calgary. So I knew the guys, and, they promised me that it was not going to lose the sync signal for my distributor, at 9,000 RPM.
Right.
Because this is one of the problems around a big RPM car. You can start to lose track of your timing, and if you do, then things shut down and whatnot. And in fact, it's an EM4 SDS. In case any of you guys actually use SDS, when mine boots up, it says EM4 Matte because it was especially modified because I did have a little bit of sync problems in the, above 8,500 RPM initially.
Right.
So
Not a problem that the standard user typically has.
no. And I see lots of guys, we're stock Foxbody 7,000 RPM. They don't because they have a limiter on them. But the tack on a stock Foxbody is garbage, and it could say 7,000 on the tack, all right.
Right.
The car isn't 7,000.
Yeah.
It uses this Performance Trends data acquisition system, and that gives me. Now, this is an old system. There's lots of newer systems, and I resisted putting data acquisition in the car for years. But here's a little secret: if you're going to run a slipper clutch, number one, almost no one will give you any details on how to set it up. You're going to be on your own.
Yeah.
And, if you called me, I might help you, but most people won't. And even like if you go to NHRA, you can see them rebuild the motor all day long. You will never see that clutch guy, and you will never see the clutch that's spirited off into the trailer. And that guy is hidden, and he doesn't talk to anybody.
Right.
You think, I got a dyno and I got racetrack and I'm going to be able to sort this out. No way. The only way you're going to get your slipper clutch set right is with data acquisition.
Yeah.
So that's why we put it in. And I wish I had done it as soon as I put the slipper clutch in. So if you're thinking about going that way on a clutch car, put data acquisition in.
Yeah.
What we get off this is 3-axis accelerometer. So I mean, it's nice to know how hard it hits out of the hole. That's why I have a legitimate measurement of how hard it hits out of the hole. But the real issue there is we look at the lateral. So you can see when you shift the car, how out of shape it's getting, right? And when you're setting a car like this up, you have several data points. You have your impression from driving it, right? But that's not always accurate. Hopefully you have video from the stands. I always had my loving wife came out to all these races and shot video for me. If you watch any of the outside video on my channel, it's usually my wife shot it.
Yeah.
So you have that, and probably you have in-car video. I had a roll bar mount set up in here. I've actually transferred it to my street rod, but so we would get in-car video, and then you have your data acquisition. And adjusting your clutch and transmission setup, one of the factors is how much lateral acceleration do you get when you shift gears, right?
Right.
And I mean, there were races where I thought the car drove pretty straight, but it must have been right on the edge of losing it. So in that case, you want to soften up your shifts a little bit, allow a little more slippage on either the automotive clutch, or you can adjust the individual case setup on the Lenco to soften an individual shift, for instance, or harden it up if it's not aggressive enough.
Okay.
So you get your acceleration or your accelerometers. There's a RPM feed. There's a drive shaft speed. There's a right front wheel speed. And with those things, we can directly calculate the clutch slippage.
Okay.
And we can also see things like our wheels up time. Right? Because you'll see the car start to move on data log because of the right front wheel. And then this car carry the front end maybe 6 inches or a little bit more off the ground, 5 to 15 feet up track. And so then when it touches back down, you can see that wheel speed suddenly shoot up. And so you know that's your touchdown point.
Right.
Right. So it's good for all of that, and all of that is really oriented towards helping you understand how to get the clutch set up, and it can also help with your chassis setup.
Sure.
Other electronics, it uses like an MSD 6AL box, and then I use this old school 3-step, which gives me 3 limits: a race limit, a burnout limit, and a launch limit.
Okay.
And the launch limit is settable on dials here. The other ones are pills.
Oh yeah.
Pills. And that just, all that is a box that plugs into the pill point on the old school 6AL.
Very cool.
I don't know what else is in it for electronics really. That's, it's gauges.
Yeah.
But
power windows and headlights.
Yeah, power windows, headlights. I mean, it has a 3G alternator.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the locks.
Right.
It still has vacuum assisted power brakes.
No kidding.
Yeah, and they work. You do have to know what you're doing when you're driving the car, though, because okay, so you got it lit up, across a stripe, 140 some miles an hour. If you declutch it and then hit the brakes, you don't have much brakes.
Right.
So you got to keep the clutch enabled in order to get that vacuum to operate the brakes.
Right.
And then when you get the thing slowed down, then you can declutch it. Same thing on the street. If you're driving up to a traffic light, don't be like hitting it and then driving up to the light, stepping on the clutch and then the brake. You've got to use the brake first.
Right.
And that's probably good advice to anybody who's running a, low vacuum cam with power brakes, or run a vacuum pump to provide vacuum to the power brakes, or run manual brakes.
Yeah.
Have manual brakes in the street rod.
Yeah. No, it's an unbelievable car. Absolute monster and mind-boggling build.
Yeah, it's dark block, 9.2 deck with 225 mains.
Jeez.
And it's an Iron Eagle, like a real Iron Eagle. So it's 4 bolts on all the mains.
Okay.
Like the Sportsman, Iron Eagle Sportsman has 4 bolts on the centers.
Right. And
the outer 2 are a 2-bolt.
Okay.
So because of that, there's no really room for an oil pump in there. So it uses an external belt-driven oil pump. This down here is the oil pump. And that has a dash 16 feed. So it's a wet sump. So it takes a dash 16 feed off of the pan up to that pump, and then a dash 12 pressure line over to the block over here, which feeds the, what would be the oil filter port on the block.
Right.
And it is an oil filter remote.
Right. Very, very cool. Yeah, like you say, 5,000 hours is probably a light determination of, well, not to mention all the hours at night laying in bed going, how the hell am I going to figure this out, right?
Yeah. You know, the classing rules required, in order for us to be in the class we needed to be in, you need to keep the tires to 10.5 inch. So it's 28, 10.5 ET drag.
Right.
It's not tubbed. The wheel wells are all stock. Everything's stock in there. Suspension is, for the most part, it's bolt-on type suspension like you would have on your street car. It uses the Steeda weight jacker lowers, which is a arm that used to be really common.
Yep.
Less common today. It's a aluminum lower control arm. Well, they're discontinued, so
Right.
you can't get them anymore. But they're a great arm, and they allowed the ride height to be changed.
Right.
And this is one of your settings to try and get your instant center the way you want. It uses Steeda double adjustable uppers. It uses strange coilover. Well, it's not coilover. It uses strange adjustable shocks in the back with factory V8 springs.
Oh.
It has the actual springs that came on this car from Ford in it. In the back. In the front, I have strange coilovers, which are adjustable. And
Right.
they're single adjustable.
Yeah.
And it uses a QA1 key bibber.
Okay.
2-inch primary headers,
Yeah.
3.5 collector, and it's unobtainium welding, 3.5-inch aluminum exhaust on it.
Yeah, no joke, that stuff, boy. Yeah, what a wild car.
Yeah, I mean, I quit going on fairground rides and stuff because nothing compared to the thrill of driving this car. I mean, it's a real thrill.
Well, and she's got quite the wall of fame, too.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these, well, whatever. I like to joke to guys I'm the most awarded guy you know or whatever, but I have a lot of awards for cars. I've done a lot with cars over the years. A lot of these are awards for racing in here. Some of these are show trophies, and, you know, I've done well showing cars like my 33 Ford Coyote Coupe that I
Yep.
built. Raced that car a little bit too, but it's done very well on the show circuit.
Right.
There's stuff like somewhere or other here. Yeah, this Enduro trophy, that's for event at the Mega Ford weekend in Mission, BC. Like, we raced this car all over Western Canada, all through Western provinces, and I think we were talking off camera about this, but that year, Muscle Mustangs and Fast Fords did a roundup of all of the baddest naturally aspirated Mustangs in the U.S., street legal Mustangs. And this car in the True Street Enduro Mega Ford weekend that year, which is an event where you have to run 5 no-stop hot lap passes, no help from anybody, just you in the car. You can't shut off the car, you can't stop the car, you don't get a cool down.
Yep.
You got to just run 5 hot laps. This car averaged 10:26 over 5 hot laps. I made 3 in the 9s, and then we backed it off a little to make sure we got the last 2, because you can't win if you don't finish.
Past the finish line.
It went 10:26 over the 5 hot laps. That was quicker than the quickest single pass from the quickest car in that Muscle Mustangs roundup. So like on a 5 hot lap event, this car was a street legal car was quicker than every quick NA Foxbody or any Mustang period in the US. So.
Unreal. Little old Canada. Who'd have thunk it?
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's the kind of car that you would rarely see, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess while I'm panning past this is where a lot of your magic happens too, which we should maybe show everybody the back half of this shop, hey?
Yeah, I mean, our main business here is dyno tuning cars. Great. Mustangs are a sort of first and foremost thing for me. I mean, I love these cars. I know a lot about Fox bodies. I've done a lot with Fox bodies. I'm always amazed at guys who are, you know, tuning these cars, or say they're, you know, a shop that builds these cars, but the guy doing it never drove one. Or,
right.
I mean, seriously, sometimes the guy who's doing the work never even drove one.
Right.
Never mind, you know, tore everyone a new one across Western Canada.
Right.
So